What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Serious Angler Podcast, and we are still here in San Antonio, Texas at the Black Bass Symposium 2025, and we have an incredible show for you guys, and it is with Mr. Ken Duke and Bob Lusk. If you saw by the title, we'll be talking a lot of Ray Scott. Ken actually joins us halfway through the episode. He had a call he had to make, so he joins us, and we have some incredible stories about Ray Scott, some pond management, some restoration, things like that, as Bob Lusk was in charge of Ray Scott's ponds, fisheries, things like that. He was Ray Scott's right-hand man when it came to fisheries. So we learn a lot from Bob, but also just the incredible behind-the-scenes stories that most have never heard of about Ray Scott, and I had the absolute privilege and honor of having these gentlemen on the podcast to talk about exactly that. But it's an incredible one. This is a great week so far here in San Antonio. Not really conservation oriented on this specific episode, but one that is so awesome and obviously such deep ties to conservation with Ray Scott in general that is a nice ode to him. Obviously, I never had the privilege to meet him in person, but it is awesome to reflect on the stories and hear the stories of him and the things he did and the lasting effects he had, not on just the industry, but the people individually. And we talk about exactly that. And I want to preface me being a dummy here on the Serious Angler Podcast. The mic that you guys are listening to me on right now, I forgot to turn on in the first couple minutes of this show. So bear with the first couple minutes. I'll try to make the audio work, but otherwise I have the microphone on for the rest of the time. But the important part is Bob and Ken had the good mics going, so you will have their audios because theirs is the most important part about this show. With that being said, while we're down here in San Antonio, do have to give a nod to our partners here because they are incredible in supporting us, do all this stuff. And usually on these shows, we have our Amped Outdoors electric take, which is our bold question, hoping for a bold answer. And basically the whole week here in San Antonio is an Amped Outdoors electric take. And so shout out to those guys. They're our preferred solution for lithium batteries. If you guys are in the market for a power station, a lithium battery for your kayak, RV, your boat, whatever it may be, look at Amped Outdoors. Incredible prices on their stuff that compared to the competition, but an incredible product that you can rely on and people that you can rely on. So check those out, as well as check out some of the sales going on at Hobie Eyewear right now, Omnia Fishing, and of course, if you guys are in the market for a boat or RV, because this week also is kind of a whole business from the bass boat segment, check out and call the folks over at Rec Lending because they're going to help you out and get you set up. But with that being said, without further ado, Mr. Bob Lusk and Ken Duke. All right, folks, we have a special one here today. My new friend here, Mr. Bob Lusk, who was introduced to me by Stephen Barden, introduced us anyway, got to have dinner last night, and we have a lot to talk about today and some really cool stories that we started getting into at dinner last night. I'm like, wait. We got to do this in the podcast instead because these are some really cool stories that you have from your time, and we'll get into that here in a second. But I guess for folks, kind of do a little brief introduction of who you are, kind of what you started with Pond, or where you started with Pond Boss, and how it got here.
Well, Bob Lusk, they call me the Pond Boss. This is my 46th year as a private sector fisheries biologist. I get to travel the nation designing fishing lakes for private landowners mostly. And I had a pond management company for over 35 years, and I sold that piece of my business. So now at this stage of life, I get to do a lot of consulting, go out and meet some cool people, be on some beautiful properties. And, my favorite thing is designing the very best habitat for a lake basin, in a brand new lake, or connect with a new landowner that just bought a property with a lake or pond on it. And that's what I do. And Pond Boss Magazine is the second thing I do. And Pond Boss is actually a multimedia company. So we do podcasts, we hold conferences from time to time, we do all the social media, plus we produce a magazine. I tell people on my podcast, Pond Boss, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year.
It lasts a year.
Yeah, so that's kind of my backstory.
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure for the folks that are tuning in, we'll link all that down below so they can come find you.
Cool, okay.
But obviously, some really cool conversation there, and I think we'll have to, down the road, get you back on the podcast with Steve as well so we can dive into some of that pond management stuff. But I think on this one, we have some really cool stuff we're going to dive into.
We do.
But obviously, I'm sure by the title and everything of this video and podcast, talking about Ray Scott. And you had a really cool relationship with Ray Scott.
I did.
Dive into that a little bit.
I sure did. It's, the thing about Ray Scott is he was an iconic American. Field and Stream named him as one of the top 50 most influential people in the outdoors. And I had the distinct pleasure to be pretty close friends with him for about 25 years or so. The way we met was pretty funny. I was working I had a booth at a fishing show in Mesquite, Texas. And it's hard to sell subscriptions to a magazine about ponds at a fishing show. But I was there anyway, and I heard an announcement one day during the show. I think it ran 5 days, and the announcer came over the PA system and says, "Hey, Earl Bentz with Triton Boats and Ray Scott from BASS will be signing autographs at the Triton booth." Well, I knew Ray had come out with a book called Bass Boss, and I wanted to buy that book. So I left my booth and walked around, got in line. There were about 10 people in line, and when it was my turn, he says, "You want to buy one of my books?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "It'll be $20. So I handed him a $20 bill. And he said, "You want me to sign it for you?" I said, "Yeah, please do." He says, "Okay, well, what's your name?" I said, "My name is Bob Lusk." He said, "The Pond Boss?" I about fell over. He knew who I was. Here he is. This is the father of bass fishing tournaments, and he knew who I was. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, man, I love your magazine. I love what you write." He says, "Don't you have a book out too?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Well, how much is it?" I said, "It's $20. So he handed him my $20 bill back. He said, "Well, go get one of your books, and I'll sign mine for you. You sign yours for me, and let's talk for a while." So we talked, probably for an hour until Earl made him go catch the plane to get back to wherever they were going that day. Get back to work. Get back to work. And we became really good friends that day, looking back on it. And he said, "Man, by golly, I need to get you to Alabama so you can help me with my lakes. Can you get there?" I thought, for Ray Scott, yeah, I can get there. So I figured out how to get from Texas to Alabama and spent some time with Ray. And one thing I remember, he's got this sign over his desk behind his head that says, "If it ain't fun, we don't do it." And that day I kind of adopted that mantra, and I loved it. And I've got some really, really, really fun Ray Scott stories, which I'll pitch some of those. Well, I'm gonna pitch out some of these to you. I made a little list so I wouldn't forget any of them. But the thing about Ray Scott that I cherish more than anything was he was sincere with me. We talked about fish quite a bit, but we talked as much about life as anything else. And he was in his golden years, at that point. And I remember he invited Debbie and I to meet him and Susan in New Orleans to celebrate his 70th birthday. So we went to New Orleans and ate at the finer places. "Mr. Scott, your table's here." Well, he had a table. Anytime we walked through the door, he had a table. And so just being around him, I tell people this, he's probably the only man that I've ever met that I could sit and listen to for hours at a time talk about himself and want to hear more. Yeah. Because he was just that kind of guy. I miss him. Yeah. I miss him a lot. Some of the funny stories I remember, I got to go with him and his entourage to go fishing in the boundary waters, north of International Falls, east, in Canada. So one of the distinct memories I had was Ray invited me into the cabin with all the celebrities. There was Johnny Morris, there was Bill Dance, Charlie Campbell, Rodney Honeycutt. There was some big names there, and I got to go sit at the kitchen table and listen to those guys tell stories until about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. By the way, we went fishing, so it was just pretty stunning to be able to hear those things. And I got to spend one-on-one time with him. I got to go with him to his favorite place in Mexico near Hermosillo. Can't think of the Yaqui River dammed up down there. I can't remember the name of the lake. Lake Novillo, that's what it was. And hear the story about that and how he found the fishing camp, and the Cinco Amigos. It was him and 4 other big-name folks in the fishing industry that owned that fishing camp. I got to He spent time with me at my house. I spent time with him at his house. I'll tell you something that was something else. In 2005, Debbie and I, November, we had bought a home, remodeled it, it was great, caught on fire. House burned down. November the 8th, 2005. Well, it was devastating, especially for my wife. She lost all of her personal belongings. It's a long, sad story, but we knew we'd rebuild, and we knew we needed to kind of get that off of our minds. So we had access to a timeshare in Ruidoso, New Mexico. So we went there for Thanksgiving. Well, there was no snow on the ground, and she wanted snow. Ray called. Hey, Pond Boss, how you doing? Well, Ray, we're trying to figure out where we're going to live and where we're going to get new stuff. He says, well, where are you now? I said, well, we're in Ruidoso. He said, well, we're in Santa Fe. Why don't you come up and have Thanksgiving with us? And I said, come up to Santa Fe and don't invite me to something like that unless you expect me to say yes. He said, well, yeah. He says, Susan and I would love to host you and Debbie. We got a little casita out beside the house. It's perfect for you and Debbie and the kids. Just come on. So we hoofed it up to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and had lunch. Had Thanksgiving dinner with Ray Scott and Susan Scott, and then not long after that, I received a box in the mail with a bunch of brand new shirts that he sent, so that's a pretty good friend. He did some fun things too. I remember Ray Scott could get away with this, Bailey. You and I can't get away with what I'm going to tell you. It ain't going to happen.
If it's what you told us last night, then today's age, you can't get away with it.
Today's world, this ain't going to happen. But Ray Scott's world? So we were over in Georgia looking at a site for a guy in southern Georgia who wanted to expand a lake, and he wanted Ray to have his thumbprint on it and wanted me to help with the fishery. So we're spending half the day out there early in the morning, and then at lunchtime the guy wanted to take us to a local soul food, southern style cooking, collard greens, black-eyed peas, good food, so we went to that place, and it was kind of like a buffet, and it was in a strip mall in that little town. Well, Ray had Jim Liner and Jim Kent's with him, two guys that traveled with him a lot, and then one other guy, Andy, who helped with construction things, and it was Ray and I and then our host. Well, as we walked out of the little diner, there was a beauty shop next to it. And our host said, hey, Ray, come over here. He looked in there. He saw a couple of guys he knew that would know who Ray Scott was, and he was kind of big dogging him, So he goes and opens the door and goes in this beauty shop, and there was 5 beautiful women, and looked like they'd been having a hard life. And 2 of them had their husbands with them. Well, Ray knows, I say knows like he's still here. Ray knows how to work a room. And he walked in there and he sized it up and he started meeting people. He turned around, looked at me, he said, hey, you got a quarter? I reached in my pocket and I pulled out a quarter and I handed it to him. He said, watch this. So he kind of targets these 7 people, and he walks up to this one blonde-headed lady, and he holds up that quarter and says, honey, I bet you I can kiss you so softly on your cheek that you won't feel it. And she blushed and looked at her husband. He said, yeah, do it. So she said, what'd you say? He says, honey, I bet you this quarter I can kiss you so softly on your cheek you'll never feel it. And she says, okay. So she reaches her cheek over there. He comes and plants this big old wet sloppy kiss on her cheek, and he said, did you feel it? She says, well, yeah. He said, well, here's your quarter. And it was my quarter. Yeah. So just things like that, that he was always playing tricks on people. But, he was instrumental in and he took quite a bit of heat for it to institute the tax on outdoor equipment that now fuels habitat restoration programs. Ray Scott started that, and he's the one that worked on the legislation to get that done. So, anybody that's been around Ray or has heard much about Ray knows how he started BASS. It was a brainstorm and a rainstorm is what he tells people. He's told that story. He's told it to me 100 times. I like that. Where he'd gone to Jackson, Mississippi. This was in 1967 in the spring to go fishing with one of his buddies. He was in the insurance business. So he took a little time off, and a storm came up and blew him off the water. Nobody wants to be around lightning in a boat, so they went back to their Ramada Inn and were hanging out there watching TV. And as I remember, Ray said they were watching college basketball. They had a tournament going on. So as they're watching it, he thought, you know what? I don't know why we can't do that. Why can't we have tournaments like they do with basketball and golf and things like that? So that's where he got the idea to start bass fishing tournaments. And then, within just a few months, he was putting on the very first All-American Bass Tournament at Beaver Lake in northwest Arkansas, and then it became legendary. If it wasn't for Ray Scott, I don't know that there'd be a Bass Pro Shops or Ranger Boats. I don't know that there would be such an industry has developed, because he's the guy that started competitive bass fishing tournaments.
You need somebody that is the trendsetter, that lays the absolute foundation. And obviously that's said time and time and time again about Ray Scott. But, and it's when you mention that of the tax for the outdoor restoration, things like that, it's funny how I think when you institute like that, something new like that, you're prone to backlash. But I feel like nowadays you talk to the majority of anglers, as long as they know that their money's actually going to the use you say it's going to, and it's going to be the betterment of outdoor, whether it's land, water, fisheries, whatever, they be happy to, obviously if money's tight, there might be some disgruntled folks, but like myself, if I know that money's going to good use, I'm happy. That's money happy spent. I'm sure you're in the same boat as that.
I totally am. I mean, I'll leave a 25% tip to the waitress. So if that money's going to great use, and I'll tell you this, I'm 70 years old, so I've been around a pretty long time compared to a lot of people, seeing some of these things. I've watched these lakes age. I've got lakes I designed 35 years ago that are showing those same signs of aging. I do it differently now than I did then. I'm looking at habitat sequences. I'm looking at habitat communities underwater. And where I'm going with this is that today's mentality is more towards stewardship. It used to be just consumers. A lot of the people I'd work with to design fishing lakes, it was to kind of satiate an ego. It's not quite like that anymore. It's more like, what can we do to improve this property? So I see a good social trend of people who want to be better stewards, who want to take care of the water, who want to take care of the land. And in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't like that. In the 70s, it really wasn't like that. I mean, for crying out loud, Cuyahoga River caught on fire at Lake Erie, not far from where you live. And now it's a fantastic walleye fishery, and smallmouth bass fishery Lake Erie is. So I'm right there with you. And those funds are crucial to help with that, even though he got some pretty hard pushback, from the people that were selling those products.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say, right? And any change, especially for the good, is the first one through the door is always going to get a little bit bloody.
That's right.
But those are the people whose shoulders now that we stand on top of. And so that's one thing that's really cool, and obviously that we all admire about Ray Scott. Even folks like myself, who I just get to read and hear about them through guys like you, where I never had the privilege. But I love learning about it because I love the history and I love to know where this came from, because without him and these founding fathers, if you will, I'm not here doing a podcast about bass fishing,
Exactly right. I'm not here talking to you.
That's right. That's right. We're not here in San Antonio and having an incredible time with some great group of biologists that are all here for the same reason. It's the betterment of the future. And it's crazy what we can do with just it seems like a small percentage of anglers and people in this space that are working together on this, where if we had 30-40% of people involved in working together on this, who knows what we could be doing to our fisheries. And you brought up the aging of fisheries. I'm kind of curious your take on that, because I know that's one of the 8 topics of discussion for tomorrow was the future of our fisheries, because it's not like we can go build a new basketball court, right? We can.
That's right.
Where we have a capacity of fisheries.
Well, let's talk a little bit about fisheries, especially for anglers. So here's my take on this. I have watched many, many, many lakes from conception to inception to stocking, and almost all of them have the new lake effect, where by about year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's fantastic. And then it starts to become what it's going to be. I want you to think about that like that. Every lake is going to become what it's going to be, and then that's what it is. That's right. That's exactly right. So it starts the new lake syndrome. You know, guys like me, we have control over what we start with. You know, we have control over what we can do with habitat. Now, bigger reservoirs, not so much, because it's a budget function. You know, you can't, agencies can't go spend millions of dollars trying to build fish habitat in a 30,000 acre lake. You know, but that 30,000 acre lake is going to have great habitat until it starts to degrade and change and shift, and the lake starts to fill with silt, and the water chemistry changes, the water quality shifts, and you know, it goes through eutrophication, which is a big word that biologists use.
Yeah.
You know, and
for the folks like myself, the common folk, what does that mean?
it gets old.
It gets old. Got it. Here we
Gets
go.
old, gray hair.
Okay.
Starts filling up with silt. You know, the wrong kind of plants to grow, things like that. And then that. But here's the thing I think people should understand about fish. There's a lot of things to understand, but this is real important. The fish are a response. They're a response to what they're offered. I call it, I've got 5 prongs on what I preach to people. I call it happy water. If the water's not happy, nothing else matters. If you don't have good water quality and your fish are trying to not die, they can't thrive. That's it.
Not happy wife, everything else sucks.
Yeah, I know. Oh, man. We all know that. Yeah. Yeah, see, I have Pond Boss, and then I have Pond Boss.
And I have my boss.
Yeah. You know how that works. Yeah, and we love them.
That's right.
You know, so the second piece of that puzzle is habitat. My little catchphrase is, as goes the habitat, so goes what lives in it. If you've got great habitat for largemouth bass, they're going to thrive. Unless you don't have great habitat for whatever they're eating, whether it's bluegill sunfish or, you know, pumpkin seeds up north, you know, or yellow perch or whatever. If you've got the right habitat for that species and all the different sizes of that species as they're growing up, if you have all that, the fish are going to respond to it. So the fish is a response to what they're offered. Happy water, great habitat, the food chain. A lot of people don't know it takes about 10 pounds of bait fish to put 1 pound on a bass, up till that bass is about 4 pounds. You know, smallmouth are probably more like 2 pounds. You know, then it shifts. Then it takes more. It takes 14, 15 pounds of bait fish for a bass to gain a pound. You know, and once it hits, you know, like 6 or 7 pounds, it's more like 20 pounds to get to that point, because now they got to maintain that weight as well as gain weight. So the food chain's crucial too. And the food chain ebbs and flows in almost every lake. If lake managers could figure out how to get that food chain, kind of keep it elevated, you'd see way, way, way more trophy bass growing up, whether they're smallmouth, largemouth, whatever. You'd see more of that. Then the fourth piece of the puzzle is you got to have the right genetics. I would not tell people to stock Florida strain bass in upstate New York where you live. It's illegal. Plus, you're not doing those fish a favor, and you're disrupting the fish that are already there. Yeah. You know, so you got to have the right genetics. In Texas and Florida and the southern states, Florida bass you got to have it if you're going to grow big fish. Yeah. And then the fifth piece of the puzzle is a harvest plan. I look at a lake or a pond as a garden. You know, and that's how most agencies get to manage the harvest plan, is with you know, catch limits and creel sizes and link limits and all that. That's how they try to manage the harvest. You know, because a lot of public lakes are pressured hard, you know, and that's right. You know, where in the private sector, we can regulate that a little bit better, and we can actually help people harvest fish with electrofishing and, you know, other tools we've got as biologists. So, yep. But if you've got those 5 pieces of the puzzle, the fish are going to respond. You know, when I go evaluate a lake, I go find one that's full of gizzard shad. I already know there's a lot of shallow water because gizzard shad live in the mud. There's not enough big bass to keep their numbers in control. You know, so I know that's a response. So what do we do to change the impetus of that lake to get a different response to meet the goals that we're after?
So when you make a change like that to a fishery, let's say you add the gizzard shad, how often are you checking on the status of it? Is it like you're going to come back a couple days, a week, a month, a year?
Well, it kind of depends. It just depends on the goals of that landowner and that lake. Every time I meet a lake, I try to get to know it. And the way I get to know it is I study the water, do a little fishing, maybe launch an electric fishing boat, study the food chain. I study the lake. And then, based on the landowner goals that are here, and we evaluate the lake with the landowner here, then we make a game plan to get from here to here. And some of that might include harvesting fish. It might include stocking fish that are not there. It might include changing the habitat. It might include amending the water. In smaller bodies of water, we can do that. Big lake, you're not changing water coming over Niagara Falls. That's what it is, dude.
No. Yeah, good
You're
luck
gonna live
with that.
with that right around the corner from your house.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's kind of how that works. Another Ray Scott story that I was just thinking about was, and this was classic Ray Scott. He was, I can't remember the quote somebody wrote about him. He was a cross between P.T. Barnum and like a famous conservationist, and he was always working the crowd, trying to do things. And of course he liked to help himself, but he liked to do for the betterment of the industry as well. And there's a lot of people with Ray Scott stories. That one thing that he did that struck me was I was at his office one day, and we're at the conference table, just he and I, and we'd had a list of things we talked about his lake, harvesting some fish, which we did, and just the lake management stuff. And then he said, he always called me Pond Boss. Pond Boss, I want to tell you something. He said, you are the best fisheries biologist in the United States. Ray Scott said that to me. I said, well, Ray, I'm flattered. He said, no, I mean it. He says, nobody can communicate it better than you. He says, there's guys out there that know more about the different pieces of it, but there's nobody that can communicate it like you can, Pond Boss. And I about fell out of my chair. I said, well, Ray, thanks. You don't know how much that means. And he leaned across the table. He says, now, don't you think I'm the best lake designer in the nation? I know where this is going. Okay. Yeah. Ray, you've done some pretty cool things out here in the President's Lake and, the other lakes on your property. You build in the shade features. You've got the congregation habitat. You got all the spawning beds and things. You're a good lake designer. He says, well, you and I need to design some lakes together, and I'll do the design and you do the stocking. Okay, okay. So he says, and this is my take-home point. He looked me right in the eye, Bailey, and he says, you bragging about you don't work. Me bragging about me doesn't work. But you bragging about me and me bragging about you, that works. So that's what we need to do. So I'm going to go tell people you're the best fisheries biologist in the nation. You need to be telling people I'm the best lake designer in the nation, and let's go do some projects together. So that went from a flattering comment to a marketing plan, So I saw where he was going.
I love how brains like that work, where it's genuine, like you're saying, but it's almost like an entrepreneurial mind that you can't stop. And there's only a few people in this world that I would let jump in middle podcast, and Ken Duke is one of them.
Looky there.
Ken, come grab the mic, man.
Where do I?
Right here.
Okay.
Right here.
Thank you so much.
Got it all rocking for you.
I apologize. I had a lengthy call that I needed to deal with, and
Business calls.
yeah, my apologies. I was really looking forward to being part of all of this and getting to visit with Bob and you, and I'm sorry I missed part of it.
We got a jump start on you.
I hear you. Well, it's not like y'all aren't way ahead of me anyway, but now it's even worse. I got
we were deep into some Ray Scott stories here, but talked a little bit about some like the reservoir aging, things like that, some pond management, kind of how we got all to the point where he's the best at managing these ponds, creating these fisheries, and Ray Scott was the best lake designer.
That's where we were going. Yeah. Well, I know you've got some Ray Scott stories.
I've got a lot of Ray Scott stories, and I'll tell you, one of the great passions of Ray's life was the Legacy Lake stuff that you helped him create. And I was privileged enough to catch a few fish out of the lake behind Ray's house, and I was privileged enough to have a chance to sit out on the back porch with Ray, sipping adult beverages and also
cheap dip scotch,
ice cream floats, Coke floats, and stuff like that. And since we're talking about Ray's place, I do have a funny story that this reminds me of. there was an angler named Carl Dice who fished some of Ray's early tournaments. And apparently Carl had some hard luck later in life and passed away at a relatively young age. And his family didn't know what to do with his remains, the cremated remains of Carl Dice. So they sent them to a guy he admired greatly. They sent them to Ray Scott. And Ray kept those on his hearth in a metal box. It's a nice box. And Ray was very fond of showing off anything in his home or office that had historical value or stuff like that. And Bob may know where this is going.
I can see if I look a smile on his face.
So anyway, you'd go to Ray's house and he'd say, you know who Carl Dice was? I was like, yeah, he won like the 3rd BASS tournament and blah, blah. He says, well, he passed away a few years. It was really sad. And the family sent me the remains and they're in that box right there. And sure enough, it engraved Carl Dice. And he says, why don't you pick it up? I'll take a picture of you with it. Ray, that's kind of creepy. He says, no, his ashes are in there. His ashes are in there. So you'd pick it up and you'd hold it for a picture, one of the more awkward pictures you'd ever want to take. And then you set it down and you'd realize there are ashes on your fingers.
Oh my word.
And you're thinking, oh my God, I've got this guy's ashes on my fingers. And then, of course, Ray would burst out laughing, and he had dusted it with the ashes from the fireplace.
Yeah. Oh, I was not sure where that was.
He did that to me too.
So yeah, there you go.
He did that to me too.
So this is something you play on everybody.
Bob knows. Yeah. We're not making up. I haven't heard Bob's stories, but we're not making these up.
No, you can't make.
You can't make this stuff up.
We can't. I mean, my brain can't function to try to figure out all that stuff. But he did that. He sure did.
Yeah,
he did that to me.
I started telling the story.
First time I went in his house.
I'm listening to Bob start laughing as soon as I start talking about the ashes. So I say, "Oh, I bet this man's played the game."
I mean, I feel like that goes back to, you said, the sign that was in his office, or if it ain't fun, we're not doing it.
If it ain't fun, we don't do it. Yep. I still live with that, by that, to that today.
Yeah. That's something we try to sing that praise on podcasts and in our own platforms too. Especially nowadays when just turmoil keeps, more and more every day. It's life short. It's not fun. Don't even waste your time doing it.
No.
Ray also had a gift for making things fun when ordinarily they might not be. He was always trying to make people laugh. He was always looking for ways to keep score. At weigh-ins, for as long as Ray was the master of ceremonies at the BASS weigh-ins, if a guy came in with just one fish, Ray would bet him $1 that he could get closer to the weight than the angler could. And remember, the angler had a chance to actually weigh the fish, but Ray would bet $1 on every single fish that would come across the stage. And he collected a lot of dollars. He rarely lost. He was well, if you think about it, there was probably a time between 1967 and, let's say, 1995 when Ray Scott saw more bass than any other individual in America.
That's right.
Well, except for Bob Lusk, who's raising them, and Bob's seen a lot of fish like this too.
Yeah, I haven't seen all those great big ones like he did.
There you go. But Ray was the real deal. I was sharing some stories with Bob yesterday, and one of my favorite stories is the pocket knife and the string story.
You need to tell that one.
Is it a good time to tell that one?
Yeah, the floor is yours.
So Ray, throughout his life and career in the fishing industry, worked a lot of boat shows, and he was really popular at boat shows. Everybody wanted to come up and meet the guy in the cowboy hat. And I'm visiting with Ray. I'd bump into Ray at a lot of these kind of shows, and I'd always want to stop by and say hello. And I'd be standing there, and invariably at some point a guy would come by wanting to meet the man, Ray Scott. And Ray had a string on the button of his shirt coming out. I forgot to tell a part of this story yesterday. The string coming out, sticking out of a button on his shirt. He'd fiddle with it, and he'd chat with the guy, and they'd have a nice conversation. And at some point, Ray would say, "Have you got a pocket knife?" And, of course, most of these shows, these guys, everybody's got a pocket knife. So the guy would reach into his pocket, pull out the pocket knife, and Ray would clip that little string off his shirt, and he'd look at that pocket knife. He'd admire that pocket knife, and he'd fold it up, and he'd hand it back to the guy, and he'd say something like, you know, when I was a boy, I had a pocket knife just like this one. And I don't know what happened to that pocket knife, but I'll bet you a week has not gone by that I have not thought about that pocket knife and wished I could find it again. Thank you for letting me use your knife. And invariably, he'd hold the knife out to the man, and the man said, oh, no, Ray. No, I want you to keep that knife. That's your knife now. No, man, I can't keep your pocket knife. I can't keep your pocket knife. No, Ray, I insist. You know, the guy's already glowing because now his pocket knife's going to be in Ray Scott's pocket. Ain't no more prized place for somebody in the bass fishing world than to have your pocket knife in Ray Scott's pocket. That's beyond cool. Ray says, oh, man, well, thank you. I appreciate it. This means a lot to me. And the guy'd go, and the guy was just walking on air because he's given Ray Scott a pocket knife. But then as the guy walks away, Ray would reach into a dry storage area or under the console. He'd pull out a mason jar full of pocket knives. But then here's the part, because Ray would have a bet going with the other guys working the booth as to how many pocket knives he could collect for the week. And I'd look in there and see 40, 50 pocket knives.
He did.
But here's the part I forgot to tell when Bob and I were trading stories the other day and having a great time with it. Here's the part I forgot to tell. Ray would have a spool of thread underneath, under his shirt, so that he could just pull out more string for the next guy.
That's incredible.
Just baiting the hook, you know?
Oh, my gosh. I was with him and spending time with him at the Classic in Pittsburgh in 2005.
Yeah.
And he was at a booth signing autographs and things and selling his book.
Oh, yeah.
Bass Boss.
Bass Boss.
I bought one, but I got my $20 back.
That's rare.
I told that story. And so then these two guys walk up, and you could tell that they're probably farmers. They got on bib overalls, you know, and got a little boy in tow, probably 5 years old. And one of the guys, the first one comes up, and he's all excited to meet Ray, and the other one's kind of standing back, kind of in awe. You know, this is Ray Scott. So Ray says, you want to buy one of my books? And that guy says, well, sure. And he pulls out a $20 bill, hands it to Ray, and then Ray signs the book and gives it to him. He looks at his buddy. He says, what about you? He says, oh, no. He said, no, come on, you need to buy one of my books too. And his buddy's chastising him a little bit, and he says, well, would you autograph my son? I thought, autograph his son? Where's this going? So the guy reaches into his pocket, and he starts pulling out some wadded up $1 bills and some couple of fives, and he's got $19.50 in his pocket. And I think anybody else on the planet would have handed him a book. Ray took the $19.50, then autographed the son's forehead, Ray Scott, across his head. I had to go walk away from that one for a few minutes because I thought that he just took that guy's lunch money. But he was just such an iconic guy. You know, early on I was telling Bailey he's probably the only person I could sit for hours, listen, talking about himself and want more of it.
Amen. Yeah. And Ray enjoyed telling stories, and Ray understood that he was a big man in the sport. But, you know, I think Ray also tried really hard to make everything better than the way he found it.
He did do that.
And I don't think anybody in the last 100 years has had nearly the impact on the sport of freshwater fishing than Ray Scott. Not only did he do all this stuff with BASS, but that also gave him the platform to do amazing things in the world of conservation. Catch and release in the bass world was introduced by Ray Scott. Right. The kill switch. A lot of that stuff would not have happened, or at least wouldn't have happened as early, without Ray. So we owe Ray a real debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his catch and release story was pretty interesting. When I met him that day when he bought my book, I bought his book, he bought my book. The very first question I asked him, do you really believe in catch and release? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I think public lakes are going to fail without that. He said, the fisheries are just don't respond to catch and harvest. He said, now at my lake, we're going to take out every bass under 14 inches we can, and when I think we've taken out enough, we're going to double it and take out that many more. And I thought, you know what? He and I are going to get along. Because he did understand about fishery science as well. He understood that, you know, and he cherished it, and he promoted it, and he pushed it. In his catch and release story, did he ever tell you that catch and release story?
About going out west to the trout gathering and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I can do it justice like Bob could here, but yeah, Ray had an opportunity to visit with a bunch of people in the fishing industry when he was just getting bass started, and it was out west, and they were doing trout fishing with fly rods and stuff like that. And it was kind of dense with a bunch of outdoor writers and people from that organization. And he would watch how they would catch a little 8 or 10 inch trout and baby it and treat it like it was just pure gold and release it back. And then everybody would kind of cheer and huzzah for that accomplishment. And he thought, man, what would they do if they saw somebody release a 5-pound bass? And so the next year he announced that there would be catch and release in BASS tournaments. And the very first one of those was in March of 1972 on the Kissimmee Chain of Lakes. And it was kind of just an experimental thing. Tom Mann won that tournament of Mann's Bait Company. And it was just kind of an experimental thing. There was no penalty then for having a dead fish. I think eventually Ray added weight to your fish if you brought them in alive, because it was tough. There were no live wells in boats. Some guys had coolers. Some guys would just lift the stringer up when they were running. But it led to the development of the live well. And now you obviously can't find a fishing boat without a live well in it. And that's because of what Ray Scott did.
Yep. And he asked me one time, he says, Pond Boss, he says, you know why people don't wear life jackets? And I said, why, Ray? He says, because they've never drowned. And, you know, after the first few tournaments, that's another thing he did.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Mandated PFDs.
That is like the law nowadays, yeah.
And, you know, Ray deserves all the credit for what I would call the modern bass tournament. If you had seen the first tournament Ray Scott put on Beaver Lake in June of 1967, you would recognize it as a modern bass tournament. Just as if you watched the latest Elite, NPFL, MLF, it would look very much the same, except the equipment would be bigger, faster, all that good stuff. But yeah, Ray mandated life jackets, because before Ray Scott, tournaments were won by whoever had the most fish in their freezer and was unashamed enough to pull them out, thaw them out, and say, look at what I caught. They were not on the up and up, and Ray put that stuff on the up and up. He was a huge believer in the polygraph. I always thought maybe more so than he should have been, but Ray really believed in the polygraph. Did you ever get to hear the last interview with George Perry? Yes, sir, with Terry Drace. Yes, sir, I know that one well. Let's tell it. That's an amazing story. He handed me the CD one day, and I got to listen to it, but you've got more inside intel on that than I do, so describe that. Well, yeah, I do love this one. This one's interesting to me. So Terry Drace was a writer for Bassmaster Magazine, and this would have happened around the fall of 1973. And Terry Drace got sent out to Brunswick, Georgia, where George Perry lived and ran a private airstrip and flight school and stuff like that in Brunswick, Georgia. And Terry Drace was to interview George Perry about the world record largemouth bass, because finally Perry allegedly caught this fish in 1932. We're not going to talk about what a fraud George Perry is. We'll go to that later. Anyway, or another time. Or
just listen to it on Bass After Dark.
There you go. In June of 1973, a guy named David Zimmerle caught a 20-pound, 15-ounce bass at Lake Miramar in California. Now, it was the first 20-pounder since Perry. 41 years had gone by, so it put the world record in the spotlight. So now, Terry Drace, Bassmaster writer, gets sent to Brunswick, Georgia to talk to George Perry, and he does. And one of the one big stipulation that Ray had, which I think is where Bob wanted to go with this, the one thing that Ray wanted to make sure Terry Drace did was to basically tell the guy, hey, we'd like you to take a polygraph. Are you willing to take a polygraph? And Terry Drace said he enjoyed meeting with the man. He thought he was just a nice old gentleman. At the time, Perry would have been 61 years old, I think. But he wasn't willing to ask him to do the polygraph.
Lost his nerve is what Ray said.
He lost his nerve, so he comes back, and Ray said, what do you say about the polygraph? And Terry Drace said, I just didn't have the heart to ask him. Ray said, you're fired.
Yep. And the way it goes on that interview, I've listened to it a few times. So Terry Drace was there with him for like 3 or 4 days in his house with his family, with his wife, the whole thing, and had kind of become friends. So he kind of hem-hawed around at the end of the interview. He says, Mr. Perry, today's world, there's quite a bit of fraud. And now the winners of these tournaments have to take a polygraph test. And that was his opening to say, would you be willing to take a polygraph test about your fish? But what he said was, what do you think about that? And George Perry says, well, you're not asking me to take a polygraph test, are you? And he said, no. And the thing
so
about
close,
the thing
so
about,
close.
Yeah, and the thing about that record, and 2 weeks later, if I recall, he was killed in a plane crash.
He died in February of '74, I think.
Okay.
So it was a little bit later, but yeah, Perry was returning a plane that had been repaired at his airstrip to a dentist in Birmingham. There was some bad weather. He crashed into a mountainside up there, Shades Mountain, I believe it's called, and that was it for George Perry.
The thing, and I love hearing your perspective on that. I want to hear more about it. The thing that I appreciate about this world record is, I've heard this story as well, and it's really hard to believe, but I'm going to have to, in my mind, hope to believe it because it gives us all hope. It gives us something to shoot for. As a biologist, can I grow the next world record? No. Don't mean I'm not trying, And then can somebody catch it? So there's astronomical odds of that being a true story. But I have to, in my heart, in my head, I can't believe it. In my heart, I have to believe it because it gives every one of us hope every time we cast a line. Because can we be the ones that's going to be the next one? But here we are. Almost 100 years
93 years later.
93 years later.
It was June 2nd, 1932. It was a Thursday.
This lives in Ken's head, rent-free.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Bailey. Exactly. It's occupying more space than it needs to. One day, George Perry, I'm coming for you.
And I want to meet Mr. Drace and say, what in the world? Why didn't you ask that question?
He's still around. He lives somewhere in the middle of the country, as I recall. I think he's a minister or has worked as a minister in the past. He's older now, of course.
So that kind of tells his point of grace with George Perry, and that helped keep the myth alive.
I say myth. I'm glad you're with me, Bob, because Ray believed it. I say Ray believed it. I'll also say this, that Ray would say things because he thought they were good things to say. And one of the things he was very fond of saying was, I believe in the virgin birth and George Perry.
Oh, my
That's
word.
hilarious. Oh, my gosh.
and so when he would do something like that, he'd say, okay, Ray, how much of that is really what you think and how much of that is you doing a little grandstanding?
Yeah.
Because Ray did not mind doing some grandstanding.
Oh, he's good at it. And a bunch of the conversations where I just listen, and I would be so enthralled and entertained, not only about what happened, but the way that he would spin it, his vocabulary, his inflection, his tone, as a speaker. And the more I listened to him, there was a number of times I'd be listening, and all of a sudden I'd just start chuckling. And he'd stop. What are you laughing at? What's so funny? I'd say, well, Ray, just the way you're telling this, and it's just it's such an amazing thing. I just think it's great. I just love the way that you're talking and how you spin your words and the vocabulary you use, how you bring all this together, because nobody else could do that like that.
Just a fabulous Southern storyteller, great oral tradition. Can I tell a couple of stories?
You can say whatever you want.
Two of the best days of my time at BASS when the offices were still in Montgomery involve Ray Scott. Maybe the two best days. And it's hard for me to decide which one to tell first. Okay, I'm going to tell them, I think, in chronological order. I get a call from Ray one Friday. He says, Ken, what you doing this weekend? I said, I don't know, Ray, what are we doing? And he was going to pick me up the next day, and he wanted me to take a tour of Montgomery with him. What it really was kind of like a Ray Scott tour. Here's the house I was born in. We stood on the street, and he pointed to the window. And here's the place where I fell off scaffolding and hurt myself when I was in high school. And here's the place where my first insurance office was. We're getting out, we're looking in, we're going in. Ray wasn't shy. he'd knock on the door and see if he could get into the place so he could show it off. And here's the first BASS offices, and here's the second BASS offices, and you're working in the third BASS offices, and stuff like that. And he was very, very cognizant of the idea that he had made something of himself and made something of the sport. And he liked being a celebrity, and he liked being
good at it,
and fabulous at it. I mean, he reveled in it, but he wore it so well because he was a good and decent man who, when he told you something, the way Bill Dance says it, he says, Bill Dance has told me many times, he said, if Ray tells you that a flea can pull a train, you better harness him up. I mean, that's my take on Ray as well.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so we're doing this tour of Montgomery, and it's fascinating to a guy like me who joined BASS when he was 13 or 14 and all that. But the last stop was the big cemetery in Montgomery. And we're in Ray's big, I think it was a Suburban, and we're tooling around the cemetery, and we stop in front of Hank Williams' grave. You know, Hank Williams, obviously country music, royalty, maybe the greatest country songwriter of all time. Uh-huh. And he says, you like Hank Williams? I said, yeah, I enjoy Hank Williams. Well, Hank Williams is kind of in competition for who's, in Ray's mind, who is Montgomery's finest son. Uh-huh. So we pull up even with Hank's grave, which is an impressive monument. Because Hank Jr. obviously made enough money later, he could give Hank an impressive monument. And so he says, you like Hank Williams? I said, yeah, I like a lot of his stuff. He says, oh, he's just an old drunk. And we speed away.
Oh, my God.
Well, Ray Scott does have a stretch of I-65 named after him there south of Montgomery. That's a crazy story right there.
It is, but you know, then I think our next stop was a grocery store to pick up ice cream for Coke floats, and he loved it if people would recognize him.
Oh yeah,
and he never went out. He never went out in disguise, like with a baseball cap or anything like that. He was always Ray Scott. Yep. He always had this cowboy hat on. If he happened to be wearing a frilly jacket, that was just fine. He was not shy.
Yep, no, he never has been. He made friends everywhere he went. He, I don't know if I should tell this story.
That means yes.
Okay, it's a little off color, but not much. So he had these, some local crafts person take little Brazil nuts, I think. No, wait, I can't think. A little nut, and then hollow it out. And then he'd stick a condom in it, and then cover it up with Bondo. And so here's Ray's spiel. So new meat would come in the door, and one time it was one of my friends, Mike Otto, that's a bulldozer guy that builds lakes. And here's Ray's spiel, and because Ray had Whitetail Institute also, so he was heavy into whitetail deer. And he would pull out these nuts and have them in his hand. He said, boys, there's an investment opportunity here. He said, this is a cross between a rubber tree and a nut tree, a walnut tree. I can't remember the name of the nut, but this is a cross between a hazelnut tree and a rubber tree, and deer love it. I've got videos. He says, you can take 3 or 4 of these nuts and throw them out there amongst all the other nuts, and the deer will come and eat these first. They love those. So I'm looking for $5,000 per person. I'm going to get 10 people in it. We're going to go into the business. And then he'd hand the nut to that guy, and he'd say, you know what, crack it. Well, Mike Otto took that nut, and he couldn't crack it, so he stuck it in his teeth. He cracked that nut, and that condom rolled out in his mouth.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I wish I had a video that day, because this grown man was squealing like a girl. He pulled that condom out of his mouth. And Ray tried to pull that. We were on a plane one time. He tried to pull that on the flight attendant. She didn't buy into it. But he was always playing jokes on people all the time.
That reminds me of a joke he played at the Bass offices in Montgomery one day. He would stop by just unannounced, and it would be mayhem. And one day, you know, it's late, and he says, hey, man, I can't wait around, but my doctor is supposed to be coming by. I got somebody coming by to pick something up. I said, you gonna be here for a while? I said, yeah, I'll be here for a while. Can I give it to you and you give it to them? I said, sure. It's from my doctor. And he hands me an old film canister, which Bailey might not know what that looks like, but Bob, you know what that looks like.
I do know what it looks like.
It's a little plastic canister, maybe yay tall. And it was
snap-on lid.
Yeah, it was a little snap-on lid. This one was black.
With a gray top.
and he handed it to me, and I take it in my hand. I think nothing of it. And he says, it's a stool sample. I'm thinking, oh, man.
How'd you get that in that little jar, Ray?
I don't want to be holding your stool sample, Ray. And he says, here, let me show you. And he takes it from me, he opens it up, and there's a little tiny sitting stool.
Oh, there you go. Did the doctor come by or not?
No. Yeah. Come on, Bob.
Well, here's one. I don't know this story well enough to tell it, but I know you will. And the guy that started Pond Boss magazine was Mark McDonald. And Mark worked for Ray for a short span of time.
I know the name. I don't know Mark McDonald.
Yeah, he was a writer. Still is. And so there was a famous fish. It died. They were going to ship it somewhere, and it got lost.
Leroy Brown.
Leroy Brown, that's it. Tell that story. This is the
Wow.
badass story about Leroy Brown.
I got an addition to that story that I don't think anybody really knows about hardly. Okay, so Leroy Brown was a fish that Tom Mann caught out of Lake Eufaula in the early mid-'70s. And nothing special about this fish. It was a 3 or 4 pound fish. But Tom Mann owned a thing called Fish World in Eufaula, Alabama. And it was an attraction. People would come from far, far away to see the alligators and the fish tank and the bait company and all this stuff, and to revel in the presence of the great Tom Mann, who's an amazing angler, lure designer. He's the guy who didn't have a high school education, and he started Humminbird. He taught himself electronics and sonar. That's how smart this guy was. So anyway, Tom catches this fish, thinks really nothing of it, puts it in the tank, because he would use this tank to test his lures, see what kind of reaction he would get out of these fish. And Leroy Brown became very famous in the bass media because Leroy would not only not fall for lures, he would knock other fish out of the way that were trying to eat a plastic worm or trying to eat one of Tom Mann's crankbaits. He was super smart the way Tom described it. And who knows how much of this is true and how much of this is Tom's marketing, because like Ray, Tom was a really good marketer, and obviously Tom also probably learned a lot of tricks from Ray. So anyway, Leroy Brown eventually dies, and Leroy Brown is a celebrity. I mean, he's been used in advertising for years at this point. He has been featured on all kinds of video and promos and things like that out of Tom Mann's Fish World, and it's a to-do. And Ray decides, we're going to have a funeral for Leroy Brown. And I think Hank Parker and Jimmy Houston were the MCs of it, and Bill Dance, and I believe the governor of Alabama was there. I'm sure at least one U.S. senator was there, and it was a big to-do. And it was in a lot of papers and stuff like that. And then Bob mentions the fish was shipped. The fish was stolen and shipped. And it was found a week or more later in the Tulsa airport. And they contacted Tom, and they said, we're not going to ship it back to you. This thing is in no condition to be shipped anywhere. And so the fish was discarded. But Leroy Brown was one of the most famous bass in history. And here's here's my addendum to that story. Many years later, around 2009 or 10, I decided, by this point, Tom Mann has passed on, and Tom Mann's Fish World is now a swimming pool supply store and convenience store.
Well, that's not fair.
And I wondered what happened to that. Well, Tom had a monument built to the fish afterwards. It's a big, heavy stone and metal monument, and on it has a plaque that says, a bass is just a bass, but Leroy Brown was special, or something like that.
He's the baddest man in the whole damn town.
There you go. Thank you, Jim Croce. Anyway, so I'm thinking, I wonder whatever happened to that statue, because it was 4 or 5 feet tall and big and heavy. I'm thinking, could that possibly still be behind Fish World? And if it is, can I get it in my truck?
I was going to say.
'Cause I want it.
It was in Ray's yard.
Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bob.
Golly.
Bob.
Can you delete that?
Take it out in the editing.
Man, I was not seeing the setup. I'm sorry.
No. So anyway, so I go to where Tom Mann's Fish World was, and they're kind enough to let me in the back, and I look around, and there's overgrown stuff, and I'm peeling back the vines and the grass, and no Leroy Brown statue. So my next stop was Ray's house. And so I get to Ray's place, and we hang out for a while, and I'm visiting, and then now I'm leaving, and Ray's walking me out to the car, and he asked me something like, "What'd y'all do earlier today?" or something like that, just some innocuous question. And I said, "Oh, you won't believe this. I've been looking for the Leroy Brown statue. Went by where Old Fish World was and couldn't find it. I just have no idea where that thing is." And Ray pointed just over my head. I mean, not 30 feet away. And there in his yard is kind of little nice hedges and stuff like that, and a little rock garden kind of thing.
Yep,
yeah.
garden, yep.
There's the statue I'd been looking for all day and trying to track down for weeks. And it's in Ray's yard. And he had paid Tom Mann's widow for that because
he told me that.
Yeah,
okay.
Because Tom didn't leave a lot of money, and she needed the money, so he paid her for it and put it in his little rock garden and retaining wall area. But now that statue is in the city of Eufaula, on the main drag, in the median of the main drag.
Oh, very cool.
I can't. I think it got put. I can't remember if it got put there before or after Ray passed, but that's where it is now. And I guess, Ray sold that property.
Yes.
I don't know, 2014, 15, somewhere in there.
That's right.
And it was either right before that or right after that he had that, and he gave it to the city of Eufaula. So see, I added an addendum for you.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
That's
boy.
cool. I have to go back down and see that.
Yeah, it's right. It's right there on the street.
Well, there's some stories I don't think too many people are going to hear.
Yeah. Let her rip.
You sure?
Yeah.
This is one I shared a little bit with Bob yesterday, but I didn't tell it all because I wanted to save it for Bailey's show only. Ooh. No, it's a fun one. Another of my best days at BASS. Phone rings, and I instantly know the voice. He doesn't introduce himself. You know who he is. Sometime he'd say, "Ken, this is Ray Scott." That's about the tone he would hit.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so this time he didn't even introduce himself. He said, "Ken, how'd you like to have dinner with me and Radar O'Reilly from MASH?"
Wow.
That's not an invitation. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll never get that invitation again. So I said, "Ray, I'm in. When, where?" And he said, "Lex at 6 o'clock or whatever."
You like Thai food?
Yeah, exactly. Now, Lex was a place I had eaten with Ray several times before. There were two places I ate with Ray. One was Lex, his favorite Thai restaurant, and the other was a place called Chris's Hot Dogs. And if you're ever in Montgomery, Alabama, you need to go to Chris's Hot Dogs. Anyway, so I get to this Thai place, and lo and behold, there's Ray Scott, Gary Berghoff, who was Radar O'Reilly in the movie MASH and the TV series MASH, and Gary Berghoff's son, Miles Berghoff, and who now goes by the name Sonar. Instead of Radar, he's Sonar. And
super cool, by the way.
Yeah, and Miles is an awesome guy. Anyway, Miles is 17 at this point. He's working on a high school project about careers or something, and he wants to be a bass pro. And his dad decides, well, if you want to be a bass pro and you want to talk to somebody about that, you need to go to the top. We're not going to mess around and talk to some local guy who's winning the Friday Night Derby. I'm going to call Ray Scott. And of course, if you're a celebrity, you can get through to Ray Scott because Ray revels in that celebrity. And he called Ray, and they stayed at the guest house out at the property. And Ray decided that I was a guy who could maybe give Miles some insight into what the life of a bass pro is and how to work with media and stuff like that. And so anyway, we go inside Lex, and Ray's thing, and I know Bob experienced this at Lex, was Ray doesn't let you order. Ray orders for everybody.
That's exactly right.
He'll order your appetizers. He'll order your entrees. He'll order the whole thing.
The whole bit.
There's no reason for you to have a menu in your hand. Ray's going to take care of it. So anyway, we get in there, and people are noticing. Oh my God, that's the star of MASH right there. And Gary, who also enjoys his celebrity, amazing, a wonderful guy. Really love Gary Berghoff. It was an honor to get to know him a little bit. So Gary's wearing a sport coat, and he's got 5x7 glossy photos of himself in the pocket.
Oh my God!
You need to start doing that, Bailey.
Yeah, Bailey.
Nobody wants that. That's just tarnishing wherever you're bring that.
Well, what's hilarious is people are noticing. Oh my God, there's a television and movie star, and every time Gary sees them notice him, he pops up out of his chair and he goes over and he signs an autograph. Well, this is an affront to Ray Scott.
Whoa!
Ray didn't take real offense, but Ray wanted to be noticed just as much.
Oh.
After all, he's on his home turf. We're in Montgomery, Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
And so Ray's trying to get people to notice him because he's there in the cowboy hat and all. So anybody who pays any attention to Ray pops up and he goes over there and signs an autograph. And Miles and I are just kind of laughing and rolling our eyes at this. At this marvelous display of celebrity in Montgomery, Alabama. And it was an amazing evening. At the end of the evening, I will never forget this. We're walking out, and Gary Berghoff put his arm around me. He's a little guy. Put his arm around me, and he says, Ken, Yul Brynner was a friend of mine. Yul Brynner was a very famous bald actor. He said, Yul Brynner was a friend of mine. And, he never hit it big until he started shaving his head and wearing all black. Think about it. I was already shaving my head, but I wasn't wearing all black, and I'm still not. But that's my...
Imagine if you did. You might have made it big.
I know. I might have made something of myself here.
Yeah, right. And let's look up your credentials.
Well,
yeah, right.
Who knows what they could have been, Bob? Who knows what they could have been? But I still... That's one of the great nights of my life. Just so bizarre.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Crazy fun.
Yeah. Is that another example of why you should always be a yes man in this industry?
Well, I don't think
dinner,
a yes man. No, I've never. But saying yes to opportunities, I'm all over it, Bailey.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing Ray really appreciated, and I know Ken did this, is he liked you to tell him no, because that would make him come kind of out. Because I don't think he ever got complacent, but he loved to debate. He loved to, and and of course I tried to stay in my lane and talk about fish. Well, no, Ray, that's not going to work. Well, I won't it. I'll tell you why it's not going to work. You know why you've got channel catfish in your lake? You don't want channel catfish in your lake, but it's because you took 3 or 4 concrete culverts from the county commissioner and you put them in there and they spawn in it.
Oh.
So if you want to get rid of the catfish, get rid of the culverts. So just little things like that, and he appreciated that. He liked you to not be a yes man. He had an ego, but he also had a huge sense of logic about him, and it was amazing to me how quick he could get to the chase. He could sift through the chaff to get to the wheat, and he was really good at that.
That is so spot on. Ray was maybe the greatest idea man this industry has ever seen, but he also had the sense to know that not all of his ideas were gold.
Yeah, he invented a deal called the Lake Life Pump, where basically he built this cylinder out of plastic that was probably 36 inches long, and it had an industrial-sized fan encased in the top. So it looked like this cylinder, probably 8 feet tall, about this much of a lip around it with a motor on top that turned the fan. And it was designed to suck water from the top of the lake and shove it down to the bottom to mix the water enough to deplete to get rid of the thermocline and make the water autonomous almost top to bottom, so you'd have more functional water for fish to grow. And I wasn't sure how well that thing worked. And I said, Ray, I don't see how that's really going to work. He said, get in the boat. This is on a July day. We get in the boat, and he throws a 6-inch purple worm right at that thing and lets it sink all the way to the bottom of the lake, 22 feet deep in that 55-acre lake, and tap, tap, tap. And he reels in about a 2.5-pound bass. He says, now do you think it works? But we got it to market. I helped him get it to market. Nobody bought it. So even though it was a really, really good idea, it wasn't functional enough because it pulled too much electricity. It was, burdensome to deploy and then take care of. The engine, the motor didn't last long enough, so it needed some little more R&D. And it was a great idea, but it didn't sell. And he had several of those things like that. But one step forward, 2 steps back, 5 steps forward, and you're hitting a home run. And that was Ray, because it seemed like he knew the matter. One other cool thing, he said, I was asking him one time, how did you get to be a salesperson? He said, well, I think it's kind of born in me. He said, here's something nobody knows. He says, when I played Pee Wee football in the 6th grade, there were 2 of us playing quarterback, and whoever sold the most sponsorships was going to be the starter. And I said, really? He said, yeah, so I got to be the starter. And he said, you know who my competitor was? I said, no. He said, Bart Starr. Bart Starr? He says, yeah. So he was a starting quarterback because he sold more sponsorships so they could have nicer uniforms than Bart Starr did.
That's awesome.
In the 6th grade. Did he ever tell you that story?
I did not hear that
story. Isn't that a good one?
That's a great story. Bart Starr, Hall of Fame quarterback, led the Packers to the first 2 Super Bowl wins.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Can you imagine if it was like that nowadays? Instead of talent competing or politics competing for a starting job, it's whoever sells more sponsorships for the team.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Well, you see who got to the NFL and who created an industry.
Both did very well.
That's a great point.
Both did well. Yeah.
Yeah, they both did just fine. Yeah.
This is good stuff.
I said this to Bob yesterday. I know he agreed then. I said, we will not see Ray Scott's like again.
No.
There will not be another of that guy.
No, there won't be. And you know what?
Do we need someone, obviously not comparable, but do you think the industry needs someone to try to, I guess not saying to be like Ray Scott, but to that effect of change?
I want to run this by both you guys. I think the industry would benefit from a face, an identifiable person who is kind of the leader or a thought leader or a spokesman for the sport. And I don't think we have that right now. And I wish we did, because we had from 1968 or 67 really until say 2000 or almost 2000 when Ray got fired by BASS. The industry had a face. And Ray got fired because he got sideways with Helen Sevier and the ownership group about he wanted to be working with Triton. They were still working with Ranger. They were not happy about that dichotomy and split, so Ray got fired. Ray sometimes thought he was more critical to the operation than perhaps he was.
Yeah, and he harbored a little bit of resentment about that, but he didn't harbor it enough that he couldn't make all the classics and still sell a few books and be the face. And everybody knew he was the face, But to answer your question, I think every industry could benefit from an iconic leader like that. I think our government could benefit from an iconic leader like that in every party. I think that if we've got somebody, we don't have to emulate them. We don't have to pattern ourselves after them. We need to be entertained by them, educated by them, and opportunities given rise by them in the hope that who thought that a little boy that fished the polluted Montgomery River could grow up selling insurance and then lay down the genesis of an industry? Elon Musk is one of those guys.
There you go.
But yeah, we could benefit from more Ray Scotts.
Bailey, what do you think? Does the industry need a face?
I think it needs a face, and
are you that face?
I'm not that face. I'm the face for radio. No, I think that, and I think it's a tandem, and this is all credit to you because we had this conversation a long time ago, and I give you full credit for it every time I do say it, and it's we need more rivalries. And I think I might have overheard you saying it to somebody else yesterday, but like you talk about the Skeet, Kevin Van Dam, but like more built up, not just rivalries, but also personalities. Maybe it's not one face, maybe it's a group of people. But you look at any of the big four sports, and they all have a face or two.
It's tough to have a rivalry. Yeah, it's tough to have a rivalry in a sport that has not only is but has for a long time struggled financially. It's hard to put somebody in a black hat when nobody's willing to wear the black hat because it's not profitable. But I miss Ray Scott. I miss the idea that the sport has kind of a universal spokesman. Ray was bigger than the leagues. Ray was, on some level, Ray was bigger than BASS, especially as he was building it. And I'll say this, and I'm curious about Bob's take on this. I think when Ray sold BASS, which I think was 1986, to Helen Sevier and a group of her investors, when Ray sold Bass, that was both a great day for Ray because it made him a rich man, and a horrible day for Ray because he lost control of his baby.
Yep. When you birth something and you get it almost to adulthood, you kind of want to see it. What's that thing going to be when it grows up? And it wasn't there yet. It was getting close. I mean, it had a whole lot of all the pieces. You know, the industry was growing. The retailers were doing what they were doing. Ray had done his magic legislatively, you know, in conservation. And it was on its way. But, yeah, I could see how the daddy would want to hang around with the baby.
And Ray was really frustrated by the fact that BASS, I'm talking about especially after he got fired, and I'm talking really especially after about 2009, 2010, Ray was really frustrated that he was not more involved in bass. He wanted to be on the stage. Yes. He wanted to be a face in the organization, and the organization wasn't interested in that. I thought that was a mistake on the part of the organization. I'll go to my grave thinking that was a mistake, but it frustrated Ray no end. And we had a lot of conversations about that. And it was never, I would always say, Ray, they want a new face. They want a different approach. The main guy blocking you is jealous of you, and it's not going to change as long as he has an ownership interest in this. And Ray had a hard time, I think, accepting that because Ray wasn't second fiddle to anybody.
Mm-mm. Nope, he wasn't.
Not in his DNA. Yeah, not in his DNA.
Nope.
I don't care if you're organizing a game of checkers. If Ray's in the room, he's running that game of checkers.
Didn't he try to sell you a hat one time?
Yes, sir. He did. Thank you, Bob. You're my setup guy now.
I messed up the last one.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're a great storyteller. You just didn't know where my story was going. Okay, so this would have been, 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And Bass has got a tournament going on in North Carolina, and there was kind of an expo at this event. It wasn't a classic, but there was kind of an expo, a lot of booths and stuff like that. Ray had a booth, BASS had a booth, and I was in the BASS booth interviewing fishing celebrities and stuff like that, and having fun with it and asking trivia questions and giving away prizes. And Ray's booth was right next to the bass booth, and he's there trying to sell old school bass caps and trying to sell his book and all that good stuff. And Ray said, Ken, you need to come over here and buy one of my hats. I want you to wear it on the stage over there. Ray, I'm not going to buy your hat just to wear it on the stage. You can give me a hat. I'll wear a hat if you'll give it to me. No, I'm not just going to give it to you. Because Ray had to keep score. And that would be a loss. If I get a hat and he gets nothing, that's a loss.
That's right.
Am I right?
That's the way he works.
That's the way it works.
You got a little money in your pocket, he's going to figure out how to get it out of your pocket into his pocket, and both of you like it.
And it doesn't even have, with Ray, it didn't even have to be money. It could have been a matchstick.
Yeah.
Could have been a slug, could have been anything, and Ray had to keep score. Anyway, so the next day he hits me up again. He said, Ken, you really need to buy one of these old school bass hats, and it looks so good on you. Cover up that bald head. I said, Ray, I'm not going to buy a hat just to give you publicity. So a little while later, he comes over. He's got his hand behind his back, hiding something. I told him, if you give me a hat, I'll wear it. He comes up to me, he says, so if I give you a hat, you'll wear it? I said, yeah, man, if you give me a hat, I'll wear it. Whips it out, it's pink. It is hot pink. But I had made a deal, and I wore a hot pink hat.
You wore it?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. I try to live up to my word. But every time he looked at me, every time I caught his eye while I was on stage, he'd be laughing at me.
Oh, man.
That's what you get for not buying one.
If you didn't know Ray Scott before today, now you got a pretty good insight.
Pretty good idea, yeah.
Outside the obvious. So this is some good stories. That's totally him.
And I'll say this to any of you all out there listening, watching, if you didn't know Ray Scott, I feel bad for you.
Yeah, he was truly, truly an iconic American. He was one of a handful of people, and it was an honor to get to know him and a thrill to call him a friend.
Thank you for saying American and not just fisherman or business guy, because this was a guy who was very patriotic, who took a lot of pride in the country and the opportunities the country gave him, and he was a genuinely good person. You can talk about the showman, you can talk about him trying to get $20 out of somebody and stuff like that, but at the end of it all, I think Ray always wanted to benefit everybody he was involved with. Mm-hmm. He really wanted you to get something out of it too. He just enjoyed making a game out of it.
Mm-hmm. And it was a game.
Yeah.
And once you figured that out, you couldn't be offended by it. You just zip your pocket shut. You know?
Got to close it off.
Yeah.
No entry here.
I marvel at how lucky I have been to know people like Bob Lusk or Bailey Ige and Ray Scott, you know, and when they get away, I mean, Bob and Bailey hopefully will be here forever, but when they get away, like Ray Scott passing away a few years ago, that's sad. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe I have not taken Ray Scott out of my phone.
You know what? I don't think I have either. I don't want to.
There's something to that effect where it's obviously it's like I had a podcast a couple weeks ago I got invited on where they were talking about superstition, where it's like obviously in the grand scheme of things logically it doesn't mean anything, but to you it means something, where it's not removing them from their phone. Like I have a best friend that passed away in college, and I still have them in my phone just because it's the idea. Yeah. Like here's a great example. I haven't unfollowed Aaron Martins on social media because I don't have the heart to do it. You know what I mean? It's like something to that effect of like letting go. You don't want to let go.
No,
not that I've ever met Aaron, but like when they're one of the greatest, you know?
Yes. And to go like he went, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard. You can't, it's hard to say goodbye. And I don't want to. He still got him in his phone. I still got him in my phone.
I think there's a sense of it's almost like a sense of love in that fact.
There you go.
Yeah, it's hard. It's
if you remove that, then it's almost like you're trying to forget or let go, and that's something you can't come to terms with. And I think that's respectable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yep, same here.
I think that just shows your love and respect.
I love the guy.
And your humanity.
And I went to his memorial service, and you know, it was special to be there. I traveled a long way to be there. You know, drive 8 hours to be there. And
so did I.
Yeah, I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Nope, no way. No way I'd miss Ray Scott's memorial ever. If they did another one, I'd go again.
And I'm a little bit horrified that a lot of the people who owed him, at least in my estimation, they owed him a career in the industry or opportunities in the industry. I was a little disappointed they weren't there. You know, of course we saw Bill Dance and Roland Martin and those guys, and they were all there, and kudos to them. Those are great people too.
Johnny Morris spoke.
Johnny Morris was there. Bob Cobb, of course, was there. Yep. A lot of amazing people. Hank Parker. They were all there, and that says something to me about those guys. But yeah, we will not see his like again.
Nope. He's a legend.
That's right.
I wouldn't be sitting here talking on it. I mean, who cares about bass fishing? Oh, everybody. You know?
That's a great point. Yeah, I think often about the fact that I owe my career in the fishing industry to Ray Scott.
Yep, same here.
Well, gents, I appreciate you guys taking time out. Seriously, this was awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Hopefully people thoroughly enjoyed these stories and the conversation, the banter. But it was incredible learning about Ray Scott from your guys' perspectives and stories I've never heard told before. And I appreciate you guys.
You're welcome. Happy to do it. Glad to get some of this where we can go back and look at it and listen to it and enjoy it. Because this is a pretty good meat about Ray Scott that people don't know.
I apologize for crashing the party late. I really wanted to be here from the beginning, but I got involved in a call. Yeah, now I'm going to have to watch all Bob's stories.
Yeah, business is business. But hey, like I said, there's very few people I would let crash a podcast, and you're one of them.
There we are.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Appreciate that. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for today's episode with Mr. Bob Lusk and Ken Duke, two incredible gentlemen. I got the pleasure to meet Bob through Steve Barden here this week at the Black Bass Symposium down here in San Antonio, Texas. And Ken Duke is one, obviously, a popular figure in the industry, a mentor of mine for the past several years now, and a great friend. And glad to call Bob a friend now as well, and going to keep in touch with him. And it will not be the last time you guys see him on this podcast. So looking forward to talking about more pond management, creating fisheries from the ground up with him, restoration of reservoirs, a bunch of different topics that we can get in with him, because he is and has an incredible mind, an incredible amount of experience when it comes to fish and fisheries. So great stuff. Absolutely love the Ray Scott stories. Hopefully you guys enjoy them. If you did, please like, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, please give us a rating and review. Check out Bass After Dark as well, Ken Duke's podcast, and also check out all the links to Bob's stuff over at Pond Boss. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll see you on the next one.